Speaking of risks, Microsoft is going to put $10 billion or something into ChatGPT. Degenerate AI, as I'm calling it now, is the hottest thing in Silicon Valley.
The technology is incredible. I mean, you can question the business model maybe, but the technology is pretty...
Well, I mean, yeah. So what I'd say is $29 billion for a company that's losing $1 billion in Azure credits a year.
That's one way to look at it. That's also a naive way to look at a lot of other businesses that ended up being worth a lot down the road. I mean...
Sure.
You can model out the future of a business like this and create a lot of really compelling big outcomes,
Potentially, yeah. So Microsoft is close to investing $10 billion in OpenAI in a very convoluted transaction that people are trying to understand. It turns out that they might wind up owning 59% of OpenAI, but get 75% of the cash and profits back over time.
49%.
49%, yeah, of OpenAI. But they would get paid back the $10 billion over some amount of time. And this obviously includes Azure credits and ChatGPT, as everybody knows, this just incredible demonstration of what AI can do in terms of text-based creation of content and answering queries is taking the net by storm. People are really inspired by it. Sacks, do you think that this is a defensible, real technology, or do you think this is like a crazy hype cycle?
Well, it's definitely the next VC hype cycle. Everyone's kind of glomming onto this because VC really right now needs a savior. Just look at the public markets, everything we're investing in is in the toilet. So we all really want to believe that this is going to be the next wave. And just because something is a VC hype cycle doesn't mean that it's not true. So as I think one of our friends pointed out, mobile turned out to be very real. I think cloud turned out to be, I'd say, very real. Yeah. Social was sort of real in the sense that it did lead to a few big winners. On the other hand, Web3 and crypto was a hype cycle and it's turned into a big bust.
VR falls into the hype cycle. I think
VR probably a hype cycle so far. No one can even explain what Web3 is. In terms of AI, I think that if I had to guess, I would say the hype is real in terms of its technological potential. However, I'm not sure about how much potential there is yet for VCs to participate, because right now it seems like this is something that's going to be done by really big companies. So OpenAI is basically it looks like kind of a Microsoft proxy. You've got Google, I'm sure will develop it through their DeepMind asset. I'm sure Facebook is going to do something huge in AI. So what I don't know is this really a platform that startups are going to be able to benefit from? I will say that some of the companies we've invested in are starting to use these tools. So I guess where I am is I think the technology is actually exciting. I wouldn't go overboard on the valuations. So I wouldn't buy into that level of the hype.
But you think there could be hundreds of companies built around an API for something like ChatGPT, DALL-E?
Maybe, yeah. I don't think startups are going to be able to create the AI themselves, but they might be able to benefit from the APIs. Maybe that's the thing. Okay. That's the thing that has to be proven out.
There's a lot of really fantastic machine learning services available through cloud vendors today, right? So Azure has been one of these kind of vendors, and obviously OpenAI is building tools a little bit further down on the stack. But there's a lot of tooling that can be used for specific vertical applications. Obviously, the acquisition of InstaDeep by BioNTech is a really solid example. And most of the big dollars that are flowing in biotech right now are flowing into machine learning applications where there's some vertical application of machine learning tooling and techniques around some specific problem set. And the problem set of mimicking human communication and doing generative media is a consumer application set that has a whole bunch of really interesting product opportunities. But let's not kind of be blind to the fact that nearly every other industry and nearly every other vertical is being transformed today. And there's active progress being made in funding and getting liquidity on companies and progress with actual products being driven by machine learning systems. And there's a lot of great examples of this. So, the fundamental capabilities of large data sets and then using these kind of learning techniques in software and statistical models to make kind of predictions and drive businesses forward in a way that they're not able to with just human knowledge and human capability alone is really real. And it's here today. And so I think let's not get caught up in the fact that there's this really interesting consumer market hype cycle going on where these tools are not being kind of, validated and generating real value across many other verticals and segments.
Chamath, when you look at this Microsoft OpenAI deal and you see something that's this convoluted, hard to understand, what does that signal to you as a capital allocator and company builder?
I would put deals into two categories. One is easy and straightforward, and then two is, cute by half or, the too hard bucket. This is clearly in that second category. But it doesn't mean
Why
that
is it in that category?
Well, it doesn't mean that it won't work. In our group chat with the rest of the guys, one person said there's a lot of complex law when you go from a nonprofit to a for-profit. There's lots of complexity in deal construction. The original investors have certain things that they want to see. There may or may not be, legal issues at play here that you encapsulated well in the last episode. I think there's a lot of stuff we don't know. So I think it's important to just give those folks the benefit of the doubt. But yeah, if you're asking me, it's in the too hard bucket for me to really take seriously. Now, that being said, it's not like I got shown the deal, so I can't comment. Here's what I will say. The first part of what Sacks said, I think, is really important for entrepreneurs to internalize, which is where can we make money? The reality is that, let me just take a prediction. I think that Google will open source their models because the most important thing that Google can do is reinforce the value of search. And the best way to do that is to scorch the earth with these models, which is to make them widely available and as free as possible. That will cause Microsoft to have to catch up, and that will cause Facebook to have to really look in the mirror and decide whether they're going to cap the betting that they've made on AR, VR, and reallocate very aggressively to AI. I mentioned this I did this Lex Friedman podcast, but that should be what Facebook does. And the reason is, if Facebook and Google and Microsoft have roughly the same capability and the same model, there's an element of machine learning that I think is very important, which is called reinforcement learning. And specifically, it's reinforcement learning from human feedback, right? So these RLHF pipelines, these are the things that will make your stuff unique. So if you're a startup, you can build a reinforcement learning pipeline. How? You build a product that captures a bunch of usage. We talked about this before. That data set is unique to you as a company. You can feed that into these models, get back better answers, you can make money from it. Facebook has an enormous amount of reinforcement learning inside of Facebook. Every click, every comment, every like, every share. Twitter has that data set. Google inside of Gmail and search. Microsoft inside of Minecraft and Hotmail. So my point is, David's right. The huge companies, I think, will create the substrates. And I think they'll be forced to scorch the earth and give it away for free. And then on top of that is where you can make money. And I would just encourage entrepreneurs to think, where is my edge in creating a data set that I can use for reinforcement learning? That I think is interesting. That's kind of saying, I buy the ingredients from the supermarket, but then I can still construct a dish that's unique. And, the salt is there, the pepper is there, but how I use that will determine whether you like the thing or not. And I think that, that is the way that I think we need to start thinking about it.
Interestingly, as we've all pointed out here, OpenAI was started as a nonprofit. The stated philosophy was this technology is too powerful for any company to own. Therefore, we're going to make it open source. And then somewhere in the last couple of years, they said, well, you know what? Actually, it's too powerful for it to be out there in the public. We need to make this a private company, and we need to get $10 billion from Microsoft. That is the disconnect I am trying to understand.
That's the most interesting part of the story, Jason. I think if you go back to 2014 is when Google bought DeepMind.
Yeah.
And immediately, everyone started reacting to a company as powerful as Google, having a toolkit and a team as powerful as DeepMind within them. And that sort of power should not sit in anyone's hands. I heard people that I'm close with that are close to the organization and the company comment that they thought this is the most kind of scary, threatening, biggest threat to humanity is Google's control of DeepMind. And that was a naive kind of point of view, but it was one that was close, that was deeply held by a lot of people. So Reid Hoffman, Peter Thiel, Elon Musk, a lot of these guys funded the original kind of OpenAI business in 2015. And here's the link. So I'm putting it out here. You guys can pull up the original blog post.
Do all those people who donated get stock in?
So what happened was they were all in it was all in a nonprofit, and then the nonprofit owns stock in a commercial business now. But your point is interesting because at the beginning, the idea was instead of having Google own all of this, we'll make it all available. And here's the statement from the original blog post in 2015. OpenAI is a nonprofit AI research company. Our goal is to advance digital intelligence in the way that is most likely to benefit humanity as a whole, unconstrained by a need to generate financial return. Since our research is free from financial obligations, we can better focus on a positive human impact. And they, kind of went on, and the whole thing about Sam, Greg, Elon, Reid, Jessica, Peter Thiel, AWS, YC are all donating to support OpenAI, including donations and commitments of over $1 billion. Although we expect that to only be a tiny fraction of what we will spend in the next few years, which is a really interesting kind of, if you look back, historical perspective on how this thing all started 7 years ago and how quickly it's evolved, as you point out, into the necessity to have a real commercial alignment to drive this thing forward without seeing any of these models open sourced. And during that same period of time, we've seen Google share AlphaFold and share a number of their other kind of predictive models and toolkits and make them publicly available and put them in Google's cloud. And so there's both kind of tooling and models and outputs of those models that Google has open sourced and made freely available. And meanwhile, OpenAI has kind of diverged into this deeply profitable, profit-seeking kind of enterprise model. And when you invest in OpenAI in the round that they did before, you could generate a financial return capped at 100x, which is still a pretty amazing financial return. You put $1 billion in, you can make $100 billion. That's funding a real commercial endeavor at that point.